my name is Jordan Lee, and today I'll be going over natural disasters and the plan to recover from them. Our world is no stranger to the threats of natural disasters. September 12th through 15th, 2018 found the Carolinas struck with Hurricane Florence. Extremely fast winds up to over 100 miles per hour, power outages, and flooding brought many cities to ruin, with over 35 inches of rainfall reported. Not only that, countless people lost their homes and 53 people lost their lives. In November 2018, the deadliest California wildfire in history occurred. The fires, assisted by the wind, covered an area the size of Chicago, destroying 18,000 structures and buildings and taking at least 85 lives and counting. Tons of firefighters and rescue efforts were put in place to find the hundreds of missing people and put out the fires. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. Back in Kerala, India, 400 lives perished from deadly floods during monsoon season in August, the worst flood in 100 years. For years, India has been hit with tsunamis, floods, and more that have taken many lives and caused billions of dollars in damage. Here's an overview of the cost of damages of prominent 2018 natural disasters. Hurricane Florence suffered a cost of $24 billion, and 70 major buildings were lost, not including homes. The California wildfires, as previously mentioned, destroyed 18,804 buildings, and the cost of damages is $16.5 billion. The Kerala floods took away thousands of homes, but also 10,000 kilometers of roads. The cost was $5.6 billion. The infamous Guatemala volcano eruption back in June, the worst in 45 years, spread over a 12-mile radius and destroyed 411 buildings. The cost of the Guatemala's national highway alone was $30 million, and that only includes the highway. As you can see, the cost of natural disasters is extremely high, mostly over the billions. We have a lot of work to do. With towns decimated and countless buildings ripped away by disasters we can't control, the only step we can take is to unite together and head towards recovery. But how do we carry this out? The first step towards recovery involves knowing what needs to be done. When providing finances to restore disaster-ridden areas, what would they go towards? We need to consider all factors and every effect of the disaster when putting together a recovery plan. Natural disasters severely damage property and infrastructure, leading to repair costs in the billions. Homes, apartments, stores, and neighborhoods are destroyed. Many families are rendered homeless and without any possessions. Furthermore, extremely essential buildings such as fire stations, hospitals, banks, and government buildings are torn apart as well. Roads are also damaged. The Kerala floods in India damaged over 10,000 kilometers of roads. These are all essential infrastructure that society, family, and government need to function. It's imperative that our fundings go towards restoring them. It will take all of us, and not even some governments have enough funding to recover from this kind of damage alone. Natural disasters kill hundreds of people, but thousands are injured. It's important that we fund hospitals or the rebuilding of them, so they can help treat injured victims to the best of their ability. There are people we need to take care of as soon as possible, and not all of them have health insurance. Hospitals will immediately need finances for equipment, medicine, and staff in order to do so. We should also keep in mind that injuries from natural disasters can lead to lifelong disabilities such as losing a limb. Funding for hospital equipment may include expensive technologies like artificial limbs. There is no doubt that utilities such as electricity and water will also be damaged. The strong winds of hurricanes can bring power lines crumbling down to the ground. The sewage system can also be affected and destroyed. Many will be cut off from running water, leading to a decrease in hygiene. The human waste storage system may prove inoperable, contaminating the water as well. Usually, the stationary water left after hurricanes and floods are ridden with bacteria and pathogens that threaten public health. To bring homes back up and sustain relief shelters, we need to restore these essential services first. Since many victims of natural disasters are left homeless, shelters are necessary. These shelters will need funding to support victims with necessary resources such as food, water, and clothing. They will also need equipment such as furniture, blankets, beds, and possibly hygienic utilities like hand soap. Funding for services will also pay into this, since shelters will need electricity, heat, and running water. From buildings to utilities, natural disasters also damage the environment. Forest fires burn thousands of trees down to a crisp, contributing to deforestation, releasing greenhouse gases, and ripping habitats away from the wildlife. The 2011 tsunami in Japan caused a nuclear disaster where tons of nuclear waste were spilled into the ocean. Pollution is imminent from natural disasters, and waste can be spilled out onto the streets. We will need funding to restore the environment, money to plant more trees, restore natural habitats, and clean up any waste or pollution left behind. Finally, it's our responsibility to take care of the victims of natural disasters, and not just the property or the town around them. Recovery includes doing all we can to restore the life they once had. After the devastating destruction of natural disasters, families and victims will most likely lose everything: homes, jobs, food, cars, and even loved ones. We can provide money for them to restart life again and donate resources such as food, clothing, toys, hygiene items, and more. Survivors of natural disasters can also suffer with PTSD. Mental health is another important factor we need to take care of. The trauma from losing everything and even loved ones is extremely hard to deal with. It's important to fund counseling programs and services for these people. Now we will go over our financial plan to fund all of the necessary things we need to recover from these natural disasters. In order to recover, we will definitely need support from the government. In the wake of any major natural disaster, FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency, gets to work. They specialize in supporting community planning, infrastructure, housing, health, and economics. Therefore, I believe it is ideal for the federal government to fund the rebuilding for the damaged infrastructure and healthcare. These two areas of concern are the most expensive. The U.S. government has an extremely large Federal Reserve of money. They can use this to buy the resources and workers needed to rebuild and reorganize fallen communities and infrastructure. Concerning healthcare, not everyone currently has insurance or the money needed. Nonetheless, all of the injured need immediate care, so the federal level should initially fund for that. The injured will be in debt, but that will be discussed later. Of course, for those that do have insurance, their companies will provide. During this time, taxes should also be raised to give the government more funds for recovery. The individual state governments have less money than the federal level, but can definitely make significant contributions within their area. Utilities like power lines that run throughout the state affect everyone if they're severely damaged. Furthermore, the environmental damage from natural disasters will be expensive to repair. Broken utilities such as damages to the waste storage system and pollution from environmental damage will threaten public health everywhere. This is a dire situation that the state must take care of. State governments should therefore fund and lead the process for fixing utilities and cleaning up the environment. However, if the environmental problem is on large scale, such as nuclear waste spilling into the ocean, the federal government should take on responsibility to stop it. Finally, the local level of government's job is to take care of the actual victims of the natural disasters. While state and federal are dedicated to restoring everything around them, the local level needs to address their individual needs, as they are the closest level of government to them. First, the local level and the state level can work together to repair utilities. The state can provide funding while the local level actually carries out the work of building new utilities like power lines in their cities and towns. They will be the ones to use the state funds to buy resources and workers for the job. When it comes to caring for victims, local governments are responsible for the funding and leading of shelters. Shelters include schools or even football stadiums, which are buildings associated with these local governments. This is a job that they can handle. The shelters is the least expensive area of concern. I previously stated that the recovery effort is going to take all of us, and not just the government. These are two non-government agencies that can significantly contribute to recovery. Insurance companies play a key role in funding for victims. In a natural disaster, victims lose their homes, get injured, and some of them even pass away. This involves already 3 fields of insurance: homeowners insurance, health insurance, and life insurance. For the sake of individual victims affected by a natural disaster, insurance agencies are needed to provide for them as much as they can. During this time, deductibles should be decreased since policyholders need immediate care and probably won't be able to afford high deductibles. Charitable organizations are probably the most important non-governmental agency out there. They don't solely involve executives who run them, but the regular day-to-day citizens who support, donate, or volunteer for them. Tons of them exist around the world, such as the International Red Cross and All Hands, the world's largest disaster relief organization run solely by volunteers. They can provide funding and volunteers to assist in the restoration of the environment after a disaster, helping out state governments. Furthermore, they can help fund and send resources needed for shelters, supporting the local government. One area of concern was providing for individual victims. This will be their job, providing mental health services after trauma by funding for counselors and starting therapy programs. They should be responsible for donating money and the necessary resources to families and victims who have lost homes, food, and jobs, needing to start a new life. Previously, I talked about how the injured victims can pay back the government, who initially fund their health care. How will they do this? Since there are so many organizations out there, they can work together to raise funds to pay the debts of these patients. Some patients won't even be able to pay them at all in the first place without them. After a terrible natural disaster, they should focus on starting life anew and recovering, and not debts. Finally, this is a look into our entire finance plan. As you can see, property and infrastructure have the most funding. This is the most expensive portion of recovery. Remember, when we are looking at statistics, those billion-dollar costs mostly derive from the thousands of structures that were destroyed. The federal government will provide for this area. Next is healthcare. There will be many injured victims in need of care. Hospitals will need equipment, medicine, and even advanced technology such as robotic body parts for major injuries. The federal government, insurance companies, and charitable organizations will work together to provide for healthcare of the individual victims. Utilities and government repair, both mainly funded by the state government, are of equal concern. Shelter will also take 10% of the budget, funded by charities and the local government. Remember, these fields are very important because they provide for the needs of the people. Last is the victim provision, involving providing mental health care and the lost resources needed for families and victims to start a new life. This area is 5% since much more money is needed for the other 5 areas. However, it is still just as important. Thank you for listening, and we hope that this financial plan can lead to a future of healing and recovery for all places ridden by natural disasters.